Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is Daily Drop number 325. Tonight, we're going to jump right back into the FinCen files, and we're going to talk about what European lawmakers think about the FinCen dumps and what their plans are to fix it. As you all know by now, it is a big problem, money laundering, not just in the United States of America, but everywhere in the developed and the undeveloped world. All of these sick-ass so-called members of polite society are busy raiding, pillaging, and raping, it would seem. And we just sit back and take it because our legacy media is way too busy trying to get you to hate each other than to actually inform you about things that truly affect your lives. Isn't that nice? Isn't that such a great job by them? So every time you're paying for that New York Times subscription or that Washington Post subscription to get to the propaganda behind their paywalls, remember who you're dealing with. These people in the legacy media have done such a shitty job that there should be repercussions for them. Instead of informing us about serious situations and breaking it down with great exposés and, programs that span 5 episodes, we get a blip about stuff like this in the mainstream media, right? They don't want to get into these details. They don't want to talk about this stuff because their bosses are part of it. What's all the legacy media, the main media is owned by what, like 5 or 6 companies? And you really think that the people that are in charge of these companies, the people sitting in these boardrooms, aren't taking advantage of the offshore system that has been put in place by Congress? Hell yeah, they have. So why would they report on it? And why would they want you to even have any idea what is going on? Well, like I said previously, the biggest mistake they ever made was locking us all in our homes for 6 months. Because boy, oh boy, has there been some time for some deep dives. And what they uncovered here in the FinCen files is mind-blowing, folks. And it is a huge, huge deal as far as what we talk about on a regular basis. I cannot stress this enough. You all know that I rarely talk about anything on this podcast besides Jeffrey Epstein or that case. And this should show you how much I think that these FinCen file drops are relevant to the case we're talking about. Because at the end of the day, all of these people that we're discussing, Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, Jess Staley, Glenn Dubin, Jean-Luc Brunel, etc., were all involved with shell companies. They were all involved in financial crimes. And unless we have the context to see the whole entire picture, unless we can build the whole entire model, then we're not going to know what the end result will be, right? And to do that, we have to explore every chamber that is open to us when it comes to this case. And these FinCen files and how these banksters have been able to manipulate these systems to continue these criminal enterprises is so disgusting and gross to me that I can't even put it into words how angry it makes me. These people have been doing this since the banking system has been created, folks. Since Jesus walked into the church, or the temple, and overturned the table of the lenders. That's how long these banksters have been at it. And even before then, I'm sure all the way back in ancient Babylon and Sumeria, you had banksters that were manipulating and taking advantage of the system and the people. And for all the millennia that we've been around in civilization, etc., it's been the same story. Well, people are starting to wake up now. And with the FinCen file drop, the Panama Papers before it, and when you apply it to the stories of the day when we're talking about situations like Epstein or any of these other international so-called members of polite society, well, it always comes back to one place, folks. And that is to the financial system. So today we're going to jump into this article from BuzzFeed, and its headline, European lawmakers are looking for new ways to fight money laundering in the wake of the FinCen files investigation. The author of this article is Richard Holmes. And look, Europe is a hotspot for this, right? We talked about how London is huge when it comes to these shell companies and these LLCs and et cetera, et cetera. So the European lawmakers for sure are going to try and regulate this. There's no doubt in my mind. The European lawmakers have never met a regulation that they haven't liked. But in this case, this might actually help. So I'm really interested to see which way they go here and to see how it compares to what the congressmen in America and the senators in America decide to do about this, because it's a worldwide problem, intercontinental problem, and all of these people are tied in together. Lawmakers called for a unified approach after revelations put a spotlight on European banks. Current efforts are like a Swiss cheese full of holes. Yeah, look, the European Union, I'm sure that there are all kinds of back channels, loopholes, etc., the same way there are here in the United States. I'm not as hip to what goes on in the European Union as a whole. I've never really got into the weeds and the nuts and bolts about it. But I do know that in London, for sure, there is some seriously bad financial crimes happening on a daily basis. Powerful European lawmakers are calling for significant reforms to anti-money laundering controls across the continent in reaction to the scandal of the FinCen files, a global investigation from BuzzFeed News and the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. Look, at the end of the day, these European lawmakers understand that the people in Europe are not going to be too happy about this shit either, right? The people of Europe don't want to be stolen from. They don't want their wealth ganked. They don't want their futures taken, and they don't want the predatory loans either. Pretty sure everybody around the world, no matter where you go, is just looking to have a bit of happiness in their life and maybe a fair shake every now and then. But yet you have all of these people that consistently, on a regular basis, with everything they do, work against that. Because guess what, folks? If you and I have to struggle every day of our lives, if we have to worry about how our bills are being paid, how we're paying for our health care, how we're going to take care of our families, then how are we ever going to have time to focus on what these sons of bitches are doing? We won't, right? And that's the plan. And that is the cycle that we have been caught up in as a civilization forever. And I don't know, I don't have the answers on how to break free away from the fiduciary banking system, but I will tell you this, they are the enemy and straight up evil. The investigation revealed how the giants of Western banking moved trillions of dollars in suspicious transactions, enriching themselves and their shareholders while facilitating the actions of terrorists, kleptocrats, and drug kingpins. The documents have spotlighted suspicious transactions involving a number of Europe's largest banks, including HSBC, Deutsche Bank, and Commerzbank. And again, how many times are we going to hear Deutsche Bank be brought up into the conversation? Are there ever going to be real penalties for these people? Are there ever going to be penalties for the people that work at these companies? Or are we just going to keep fining the companies, the entities, and giving them a little slap on the shoulder for $150 million? I know it sounds like a lot of money for us, and it is a lot of money, no doubt about it. But for these people, forget it. That's nothing. That's a half a day of swaps. So you can't penalize these people monetarily. It has to be truly sanctions. They have to go to jail. There has to be prosecutions, whatever it may be. But it cannot just be monetary penalties, folks. That is not enough of a deterrent. During a session Thursday of the European Parliament in Brussels, lawmakers debated how to better combat money laundering. Dubravka Suica, Vice President of the European Commission for Democracy and Demography, said countries in the European Union are not up to the task of addressing global networks of money laundering by acting alone, and must join forces to make the system less open to abuse. Yeah, I would think that the European Union, being a union, that they would be, together on this and get everything tightened up. But again, I'm sure that there's all kinds of political infighting going on, struggles we don't even know about, lawmakers who are against it because they're enriching themselves. The same story that plays out in America, I'm sure. And that's what happens when you deal with people, right? How many times do we talk about it here on this podcast? There's no good guys. There's only gray characters. Human beings are capable of great good. There is no doubt about it. And there are good people in the world, no doubt. But those same good people can become bad if you put a sword in their hand. You understand? Circumstances, my friends. And with people like this, they're going to try to enrich themselves. You know that there's going to be people trying to enrich themselves, and there are. We've seen it here in America. How many politicians in America have went into office with their net worth being a few $100,000, and then they leave and they're worth millions? How is that even possible on your salary? And nobody questions it. Nobody gets agitated about it. Nobody calls them out on it. And I am sure the same exact thing is going on in Europe. The FinCen files illustrate the vast scale of the problem, Suika said. The European Union has to act decisively and collectively with the European approach to supervision. So, in layman's terms, that means get ready for a regulation party. Europe loves to drop regulations on business and banks, et cetera, et cetera. So I would expect that there's going to be some heavy regulating coming in the future for European banks as a direct result of the FinCen files and what they have brought to light. Because these European regulators, they have no qualms with the regulations, folks. They really love them. They go a bit overboard, in my opinion, with the regulations. But again, I'm not a citizen there, and my opinion ain't worth shit, right? Several members of parliament called for a centralized and uniform European framework to tackle money laundering. Well, that would be pretty interesting. It would kind of be like a FinCen database. I wonder how they would put that into effect and what would go into it and who would be in charge of it. There's a lot of details that obviously will have to be worked out within the European Union in Brussels, and there will definitely be some going back and forth over that. We'll keep an eye on it and we'll see how it progresses, and we will see what they come up with. Eero Heinäluoma, treasurer for the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats in the European Parliament, said current anti-money laundering efforts are like a Swiss cheese full of holes and called for a uniform regulatory framework. Yeah, well, who can disagree with that? I mean, who cares what your politics are? The guy has a good idea, right? See, that's the point I'm at now with politics. If an idea is good, I don't care what party you're with or any of that shit. At the end of the day, I'm looking for my life to be just a little bit better. And if your policies can make my life a little bit better, then you can guarantee that I'm going to be thinking about voting for you. Besides that, I don't even... What do the political parties even stand for anymore? Nobody knows. They don't have platforms. All they are hit jobs about the other side, blaming the other side. Nobody ever taking responsibility. No one ever picking up the ball and moving it forward. And we just stay stuck in neutral. Despite these alarms, banks still often execute these transactions. And again, it's thanks to the great work of journalists that the scandal is revealed, he said. It demonstrates once again that the existing money laundering system simply does not work. He's 100% right, and about both of those, by the way. I'm very hard on a lot of these legacy media outlets, right, and the reporters that work for them. But when it comes to stuff like this, anyone who isn't impressed by the work done by these investigative journalists is probably carrying some sort of grudge or has some kind of political beef or whatever it may be. But when you look at the work that was done here and you look at the files that were brought together and were released to the public, and you see what good investigative journalists can do when they have a mind to actually do work, well, this is the result. When are we going to have 88 journalists or 400 journalists come together and dig into the Jeffrey Epstein case? Because my friends at the consortium of journalists and at BuzzFeed and all these other places, I guarantee you, there is more of a story here than anybody has ever put out. Sven Giegold, the economic and financial policy spokesperson for the Greens European Free Alliance in the European Parliament, echoed his parliamentary peer and slammed Europe's current anti-money laundering measures, adding that a centralized system is needed. I would think so. With all of the states in the European Union, there has to be some sort of centralized database, right? Or how are you going to regulate this? If you don't have it centralized and it's each country, you're relying on compliance officers from each country to get together and work together to yank the suspicious activity. I don't really understand how it even works over there right now. In America, it's a shit show, but they have that database at the very least, right? So over in Europe, I think a centralized system is probably the best bet for them to try and combat this. But at the end of the day, no matter what system you have in place, it's all about the penalties. If you have the proper penalties for these people that are gaming the system, these people that are robbing us blind, well, you put some of these people in prison for the rest of their lives, I'm pretty sure that's going to curb a lot of the shitty activity. The Commission has observed without acting like a money laundering authority, he said. Just last week, the European Council on Foreign Relations said that in light of the FinCen files, European countries should think carefully about reforming anti-money laundering frameworks. The Council on Foreign Relations, no matter where they're located, not probably the group of people I'd be taking advice from. Another group of people who are part of so-called polite society. Jeffrey Epstein was part of it, donated money to it, etc., etc. Anytime I see the CFR, the Council of Foreign Relations, or anything related to it, I am skeptical and I do not trust them. They should recognize that they have no more success by forming partnerships with financial giants on financial regulation than they would by forming partnerships with energy giants on climate policy, the European think tank said. Well, look, I agree with that, right? A broken clock's even right 2 times a day. And as far as the CFR and my dislike and utter hatred for them, really, they're not wrong about this. You can't go into business with the banks and expect them to regulate themselves, no more than you can expect Chevron, BP, or Exxon to do the right thing if there's no regulation and oversight over them. When you're dealing with this amount of money, you're dealing with a lot of people who are unscrupulous, who do not have any problem not playing by the rules. And these are the people that are in charge of our financial system. These are the people that continue to prey on the most vulnerable financially amongst us. And yet nobody in the legacy media has really dug in, has really done the right thing, and done a huge expose on these people. Instead, we continue to allow them to steal, we continue to allow them to cheat, and we continue to allow them to keep the rest of us under their thumb. My question to all of you out there is, how much longer are we going to accept that? If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. All right, everybody, I'll be back tomorrow morning, and we'll start all over again.